Ungratefulness is such a bad choice because what we become ungrateful for, we are on our way to losing.
Right.
You know, Adam and Eve. We talk about Adam and Eve, and you know they had all these trees that they could eat from, but they were so ungrateful. You know, they had everything, but they were so ungrateful because of the one thing they didn't have. Right.
What's your name?
My name is Anna Grace Smith with my co-host
Renee Leonard Kennedy.
and we are at NRB
2024. We welcome you to our Moralty
Living
spot.
room.
And what we have a wonderful author today.
We have Larry Duggar, who is an author, pastor, speaker, and our wonderful guest today.
And I
It's
also
had the
met
pleasure of
you in Florida, and we talked fishing and guns. Two of my favorite things.
Absolutely. Hey guys, thanks for having me today. Super excited.
Well, we are really doubly excited because we feel, I don't want to say kindred spirits, but we're going to go say kindred spirits. Because we had decided we were going to wear...
Really crazy kitschy socks.
Oh yeah, we
And
got
so
them.
hold yours up.
Hold your socks
Here
And
we
up.
what does
go.
yours say?
I'm going to strain my glute.
My socks are from Hawaii.
Oh.
They're actually from Hawaii?
They are. Not that I got to go, but a friend went, and he brought
great.
me back some socks.
So they're precarious socks.
That's
They
not, they're
are.
like
Yeah.
I
hibiscus.
know.
What are yours,
I've never
Renee?
been there. I want to go, but these socks have been there.
Well, I mean, that's almost, yeah.
Pretty close.
Kind of like Peter's shadow and all that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
But no, mine says dogs. I'm not,
With a bunch of exclamation marks.
well, I mean, I love my Tinkerbell. You
We
know.
need Tinkerbell.
Yeah, we need Tinkerbell.
Mine says stop talking. I was
But
just told.
There you go.
But don't.
But don't. I was just told the other day that I talk in circles and talk like too much.
Yes.
And I thought these are really funny.
Well, it's
You
so
know,
it's talking to yourself.
I'm trying to be more concise in my words, even on podcasts, because I'll have a point, and then I'll give a bunch of prefaces before I get to the point.
And we'll
So this is
forget.
kind of a memo for me.
Okay, there
today.
you go.
But I want to tell you something, Larry. So last night I was having dinner by myself at the restaurant here, and my buddy, I did not know this, but Dylan Dry was standing on the bridge, and he takes this long video of me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I see all this greenery. I went, okay. He said, let me show you this video. And I thought, oh, great, another greenery thing. He zooms onto me. I'm binge reading your book.
Okay, yeah.
Because it is that good. And it's when good people make bad choices. So this kept us up. She and I got together and we talked about it last night.
Yeah.
Because we were trying to figure out how to go about talking about not just your book, because it's not just a book. It's a survival kit thing.
Yeah.
And I love it. And it's broken down into different chapters. And it has these daily reflections. And you say it's actual toolkit to prevent us from falling, and you use things from the Bible. So do you want to elaborate on any of that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've been a pastor for 34 years, and for a good portion of that, I was an administrator at a counseling office. And all of the time I had these people coming in for counseling who I thought were very spiritually mature people, people who knew the Word, people who had been in church, some of them for decades. And they were making just the dumbest decisions that, you have ever heard of. And I could relate to that because sometimes I also make dumb decisions.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, so maybe we never outgrow our ability to make bad choices.
Right.
And maybe we have to just learn to be on guard against our humanity, because we always have that human side that's coming at us.
Right.
And even the Apostle Paul said, the things that I want to do, I don't do. And the things I said I would never do again, that's what I'm doing.
That's our life.
We were
Yeah.
just talking about that last night.
Yeah, and he was really, the Apostle Paul, he wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. This is a spiritual person who saw Jesus on the road to Damascus, literally saw Jesus.
Right.
And yet he's still talking about doing things that he doesn't want to do. And I don't know, when I read that verse, it was like I read it for the first time, even though I'd seen it thousands of times before. And I thought, you know what? There's got to be a better way.
There has to
As
be.
believers, we've got to figure out why we make the choices that we make.
Right.
so that we can maybe not make them.
Right.
And if we have made a bad choice, how do we get out? Like, how do we fix it?
Well, what I really love about this book is, one, your imagery, your use of wording is stellar. But it really stuck to me because you said what you want to do is build a fence, above the cliff.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to visit the hospital at the bottom of it.
Yeah, that's it. It's easier to build a fence at the top of a cliff than to build a hospital at the bottom.
Okay.
And that, I wish someone had taught me that years ago as a young Christian, that, hey, if you make this choice, Larry, there's going to be some really severe consequences that are going to flow out of that. And so maybe let's look at how to make a better choice so that you don't have to deal with all of the collateral damage that is going to be created when you do anything that where the Holy Spirit is saying, hey, don't do that. That's not a good plan. That's not a good idea. That's going to end really bad for you, And so what I did was I took 12 behaviors that I feel like we deal with the most as believers, and each of those behaviors is a chapter.
Well, let me tell you how I went through this book. So, because I only had a limited time, but I was binging. I wanted to absorb it. So I'm flipping through and looking. Okay, lust. Okay, I flipped through that. I flipped through several of the ones. I'm like, okay, I'm not dealing with that now. I need to come back to it because I never want to presume that I want to have my fence in place.
Sure.
Because I don't want to presume. But right dead center in the middle of this wonderful book, pride.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's something that we subconsciously sometimes don't even realize we're doing. And that's what we were talking about last night on our balcony chat. Yeah. Is this idea of what do we do when we're not even aware that we're sinning or that we have these tendencies? Perhaps other people see it, or even if they don't, like in our private lives. And when Renee we were talking about pride this morning. What do you do with that?
Well, wait, let me just say, he has one of the best lines I've ever heard about Lucifer. He says, Lucifer was like he was the first supermodel, which just blew me away.
Yeah, well, pride at its core is when we put ourselves first.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's so many definitions of pride that we could talk about, but really when you look into the scripture, pride is when you say, I'm first. I'm more important. My needs matter more than your needs. It's not preferring one another, and that's what got Lucifer in trouble. He lost sight of the fact that he was who he was because of God. Right. He wanted to be God, but he was who he was because of God. And as long as he had that connection with God, he had a bright shine. We read all about his life in the book of Ezekiel, and he had a bright shine. And as soon as he decided that he could do a better job, being the boss, he lost everything. And that's typically the way pride goes. It does go before the fall.
You're right.
And I've always said that there are two kinds of people: humble people and those who are about to be. And
oh my goodness, it should be a t-shirt.
Yeah, well, it's true. God resists the proud, obviously, but he elevates those who are humble. Yeah. And when we humble ourselves, God will elevate us. And when we don't humble ourselves, God has to do that. And when God humbles us, that's called humiliation.
Yeah. Okay, well, in this, because I starred so many things, but the biggest star was the question. Okay, it says, how do we celebrate our success without celebrating ourselves? Yeah. How can we be proud of who we are and our accomplishments without being filled with pride?
And I think on top of that question, because I was thinking as well, we live in a culture where we say just be yourself.
Yeah.
We need to have self-worth.
Right.
But what's the balance between the two?
Yeah.
And in this world that's fueled with, and particularly like promoting books and, wanting
even
people.
Even here at NRB, like, a question I often ask myself is, would Jesus come and sit at this table or turn it over?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the book I talk about Samson. we go through the life of Samson. But for me personally, I think anything that I do that I can't invite God into, that is an area where I'm going to be tempted to get into pride. Samson forgot where his strength came from.
Right.
He started relying upon himself, and the second he started relying upon himself, he lost everything. And so for me personally, I've had this conversation with my sons because I have 2 grown sons, and I want them to be proud of who they are. I want them to have self-worth. I want them to have self-esteem, but I don't want them to be overinflated with ego problems, or I don't want them to be able to see life as something that they can do apart from God. And so I think self-esteem is very important, and I think we get self-esteem from things that we accomplish. For example, I like to run marathons. I like to do
marathon runners.
I like to do, you do too. All right.
From running.
Yeah, I ran a marathon here in Nashville not long ago, and so I like to run marathons and do wilderness races, and I like to do big projects because those are things at the end of the day that no one can take from me. I mean, people are always trying to take from us, right? They're always trying to tear us down or give us a bad day, but those things that we go out and accomplish because we've worked hard, those are things that people can't take from us. And so I get my self-esteem from the things that I accomplish. But my worth comes from God.
Yes.
That's very different. Self-esteem and self-worth are very, very different. And so, yeah, I can have some self-esteem because of something that I accomplished, but my worth can't be in what I do, because all of that's going to not matter one day, when I stand before the Lord. But my worth has to come from God and from me walking in His plan and His purpose and doing life His way. And anytime I separate myself from doing life His way, I think pride is right there. Right there saying, hey, look at you, Larry. You're awesome, Larry. Look what you did, Larry. And it's like, no, apart from Him, I'm nothing, right? Because in Him, I live and move and have my being. And if I can stay connected to Him and continue to work hard and do the things that maybe are, substantial, then I think, man, that's a recipe for a great life. Yeah.
I think this book, though it is written with scripture in it, it can be a very general market book because we're all wrestling with these same problems. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, one thing you point out is Lucifer didn't see it.
Right.
What do we? Yeah. This world doesn't see it. We as Christians don't see it. Yeah. The world does not see it. What do we do about that?
Yeah. That's the thing. Like usually the person who struggles the most with pride is the last person to know.
Yes.
And I don't. I've read that story of about Lucifer 100 times probably, and I still think he's convinced that he's right. I still think in his mind he believes that somehow he's going to be able to make his plan work.
Seriously?
Yeah, I think he believes that. Otherwise, he would just give up. But he never gives up. He just keeps coming at us, right, the whole time. And so for me, I'm always doing, I'm always looking into my own heart to make sure that I'm not reading my own fan mail, I don't want to get to that place where I feel like that that I'm going to be able to, I don't know, make life work without the help, without God's help, because it won't. And I think that's a struggle for a lot of people, especially I have a type A personality,
Hello, type A.
Yeah, and so when you have that kind of personality. You're just like...
I don't think she sees her type A.
Yeah. Well, when you have that personality type, where you're kind of bossy and,
she's not
like
bossy.
you're kind of, you're the one that has to make things happen. And
okay, that's me.
Yeah.
Actually, but she is very driven in her ways.
Yeah. And so I can be like that sometimes. I can live like everything depends upon me,
Right.
and that's pride.
Yeah.
That's not what the life that Jesus has called us to. Jesus,
What do you think we miss when we do that?
What's that?
What do we miss when we are holding it unto ourselves as if it all depends on us?
I think that anything that I see as completely depending upon me is only going to go so far before it falls flat or before it stalls out. I think when we truly have the Lord in the driver's seat and we're doing everything that we can do, to do our part, but we're keeping Him first, I think the sky's the limit. I think we can see incredible results happen in our lives. But anytime that I have ever made things about me or about what only I can do, it just doesn't go very far, and I don't see the results that I want to see.
Do you think that we've become maybe comfortably numb as a culture, and perhaps that's why we don't see pride?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's one of those things where, we live in a day where everybody is talking about, you need to discover your own truth, and you need to figure out your own way, and you need to, make your own path. Well, that is not a biblical concept. No, it's not about my truth or what I think or about my path, or it's not about me at all. And when life becomes about us and what we think and what we feel and what we believe, we're in trouble. We're in real trouble. And I think that is pride, to think that we know more than God.
Ooh.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think? Because I don't know how things went in your part of the country during 2020. I can only say what happened in my house.
Yeah.
But we became very inward, and I had 2 older teen young women with me. And you became all our houses became. I live on a farm.
Yeah.
And so there's a great amount of space I could walk, and I invited people over, and everybody kind of just hold it up.
Yeah, for sure.
And they didn't reach out. We became inward. It was almost like it was built to make us self-reliant. So much so that I don't know how many podcasts I've talked about my fear of being prayerless. And it almost felt, I was doing my normal stick to the Lord, lean on Him. But there was a part of me that was very quiet towards the Lord. Now, I didn't know if it was silence and I was really leaning on Him, or if I was just prayerless. So I would take these walks, but now it's come around where I'm really leaning on Him. And I love that, but there are times. And we have this problem as single women. It does feel like it's up to us. And, it's not that we're not leaning on the Lord, but there's certain things, you have to not separate. We want the Lord to do those things with us, but we still have to be the arms and feet.
Absolutely.
That do them. So how do we do that as single women
in
a world that, you don't have, can you take out the trash? No, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, COVID definitely changed a lot of things, and even at our church where I pastor, people who used to be in community all the time started living in these silos.
Oh, wow.
Because we weren't allowed to connect with one another. We weren't even allowed to have church for a period of a few weeks, and so it's really hard to be the hands and feet of Christ when you're locked up at home, and you can't go anywhere and you can't do anything, and so. I know for us, we had to learn a lot of non-traditional ways of doing ministry, ways to say, okay, if we are going to continue to be the hands and feet of Christ, we're going to have to reevaluate, maybe realign some of our models in order to be effective. And, anytime you start changing things like that, I think that's when self-reliance starts creeping in, right? Because all of a sudden we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to make it work. We're trying to do sometimes what only God can do. And so I know for me, after COVID kind of began to wind down, I sat down with my staff, and we had to do a lot of reevaluating and figuring out what does life look like now, because people have been so desensitized to I don't know, just life changed, definitely changed for everyone on the planet. So I think you asked the question earlier, how do we continue to be the hands and feet of Christ in those kind of challenging situations? And I think it's different for everyone. And I think it depends upon, where God has you and what season of life you're in, and being creative and not afraid to do things differently maybe than you've done them in the past.
So I'm curious, with the idea of pride and self-reliance, there also seems to be this opposite end of the spectrum where people feel like if they have any amount of quote-unquote self-worth, or they find even these ways in which God has given them passions and joys, they have to diminish that. Almost to the point of, I don't want to say self-sabotaging, because that's kind of a different mindset. But what's the difference between that? How do you live in the ways perhaps God's wired you up that might naturally start to integrate into your identity without making it your identity? Does that make sense?
It does, for sure. I think we're all, very uniquely gifted and designed by the Lord for whatever work that He has placed us here to do. And one of the things, sometimes this is kind of a big thing for me. Sometimes when people come to Christ, we don't do a great job in the church teaching them that God wants to change their character, but He will allow them to keep their personality. Right? So God gave you a personality that is unique to you because He put you here for a specific task. And we were talking earlier about our crazy socks, okay? These socks have nothing to do with our character. These have to do with our personality, right? So when we come to Christ, what happens in the church a lot of times is, we want to start changing people's personalities, but we're not called to do that. God gave them that personality so that they can be His hands and feet, however that needs to look for them, while at the same time,
instead of being cookie cutter,
allowing them to keep, He'll change their character, but they can keep their personality so that they can do the work that they've been assigned to do. And so, for example, the church where I pastor, I don't get hung up on, the way people dress or what color their hair is or how many piercings they have or, any of those things, because those are all personality issues. And so we're talking, about accomplishing whatever it is that God put you here to do without getting into pride, without getting into, self-reliance. For me, I think a lot of that is just, being who you are. And I'm not talking about character development. We all need that. When we come to Christ, we come in as babies, and there's a lot of rough edges that we have, and there's a lot of things about us that need to change so that they come into alignment with Scripture. But there's also a lot of, fun, quirky things about our personalities and about who we are and how God made us and what our passions are. I've won so many people to the Lord out running, or maybe doing a wilderness race, or not in church, not in a church setting, not in a setting like this for sure, but just out doing what God has put in my heart that I like to do, right? And so I can be the hands and feet of Christ wherever I'm at, especially in that arena where there are other people there like me, that maybe they don't know Christ, but they know me now because we got to know each other doing a marathon, and I can share Christ with that person.
Do you think there is a way in which we know we've become too confident? Because confidence, self-worth, self-reliance, I personally think they all differentiate. I see them as very separate, because we also live in a culture that says you need to be more confident. And even in things like this, like on a podcast, it's, all these workshops that say, oh, well, here's your stage presence, here's your confidence, things that matter in how you present yourself. But when does that become something that's an ego booster, do you think?
Yeah. Well, for me, I think confidence is being prepared. I think when even on a podcast like this, if you show up and you're prepared and you've done your homework and you've done all of the necessary things required for you to I lost the word that I was looking for, but basically you just show up and you're ready to do your job here. I think there's a lot of confidence that comes out of that. I don't think it's a very good idea to be so confident that you don't prepare, you don't get yourself ready, you don't ever.
Oh, we've done that plenty of times.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you start leaning on your own strength at that point, right? You're just like, I'm just going to show up and see what happens,
That really is good.
And I know people that, that they maybe they thrive a little bit better than others they're able to do that a little bit more. But for me personally, I feel the most confident when I show up and I'm prepared. So yeah.
I'm curious with that because there's the idea of taking pride in what you do. And
yeah.
Oftentimes I see, and I will say oftentimes with Christian culture, church culture, there is this idea often of mediocrity and people kind of expect that. But then on the flip side, pouring so much into something, that it becomes an ego booster versus pursuing excellence and wanting to do it because you want to reflect God.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just actually talking to my staff about this last week because I'm not a person who has a lot of anxiety. I'm fairly laid back.
I wish I could relate to
we
that.
just will touch the tassel of your
so
Please, your golden
Yeah, so I don't have anxiety, but I told my staff last week, I'm like, you know what? I think I do have a little bit of anxiety that I wasn't aware of because sometimes I have performance anxiety.
Really?
And when you want to do well, when you want to, you don't want to just show up and it be mediocre. Right. You want it to be excellent every single time. There's a lot of pressure that goes with that. And so when you're a pastor, every week people are judging you. Was the sermon good? Did it speak to their heart? Did it help them? When you go in and start reading book reviews, oh my goodness, you want all of those to be good. You don't want to go in and read anything that's bad. And so I think performance anxiety is definitely a real thing. And, the Apostle Paul, we talked about him earlier. He said, whatever we do, we ought to do as unto the Lord. And I think there's a big difference in, wanting things to be excellent and needing things to be perfect so that you can be happy.
Right.
Because they're not going to that way. And
he also said, boast in the Lord alone.
Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes that excellence doesn't have to be the enemy of perfection, right? So we're never going to get it perfect. I think it was Vince Lombardi who said, if you chase perfection, you'll achieve excellence. So basically he was saying you're not going to get it perfect, but go in with that thought, and then it's going to probably end up a whole lot better than what you might think. And so I don't know, whenever I get ready to maybe write a sermon or maybe start a new book, I always take a minute and then just invite God into the process. Same way, like if I start training for a marathon, that's not a super spiritual activity, I guess, but I always take a moment and invite God into that because I know for the next 16 weeks I'm going to be, that's going to be a big part of my life. And so if it's going to be a part of my life, I need God to be over that part of my life. So I need him to keep me injury free. I need like all the things to happen. So for me, I think I definitely perform best when I find ways to include God into whatever it is that I'm doing, for sure.
Well, I think that season of prayerlessness for me resulted in, and so it felt like a vast failure.
Yeah.
And I was searching myself, am I being prideful? And I was maybe hiding myself and doing all these other things that what I mean? We were all tucked in.
Yeah.
But then it came, and I came out on this other end where I am inviting him into far more things before, where I would just thought, okay, this is I can do this.
Right, yeah.
Where doing the dishes is not so lonely anymore like it used to be. So I mean, maybe the whole thing behind that was a bunch of humility that I needed.
Yeah.
He was being very gentle and humbling.
Yeah.
But it did seem like a world full of hurt. But I don't know.
Do you think it's sometimes possible to not even realize that these things you do that you get really good at, such as, I'm just generally speaking, but say marathoning, teaching, insert whatever on someone's palette of choice, that they get really good at it. You refine it to where you're kind of known for those things, and perhaps you don't realize it's a source of pride?
Yeah, well, I think Satan's always looking to attach himself to anything that we're doing, and sometimes I think, we think that the enemy's going to come and he's going to attach himself in a way that, maybe looks like a sin, but that's typically not how he shows up. He typically is very sneaky, and if he can find an area of your life where you can be tempted to become self-reliant, he's gonna wiggle his way right in there. And in fact, there's a chapter in the book about ungratefulness, and we don't think about ungratefulness as being a bad choice.
I know, I saw that. That was like the second one.
But as I was digging into that, ungratefulness is such a bad choice, because what we become ungrateful for, we are on our way to losing.
Right.
Adam and Eve. We talk about Adam and Eve, and they had all these trees that they could eat from, but they were so ungrateful. They had everything, but they were so ungrateful because of the one thing they didn't have, right? And I think that connects to what we're talking about, because we can just become ungrateful for the fact that it's our abilities. No matter how strong or how weak they are, those things ultimately come from God, right? They flow down from Him. And if I become ungrateful and start to feel like that, well, I don't really need Him to be able to do this certain activity in my life, or I've been writing teachings for 35 years. I don't really need Him anymore, to be able to write the next great teaching. I'm on my way to losing a lot of good things in my life. So I think, I think pride and ungratefulness kind of go together. We have to watch that.
I had an interesting crux that I realized, and I was talking to Renee about it. It was about a year ago, because we were talking along the same topic. I realized that when I introduced myself to people, I felt this need to tell them that I had lived in LA before, that I would not even just outright introducing it, but I didn't feel like where I was enough.
Yeah.
So if I had these other things that seemed really big and bad that I had done, that I could just kind of slip in there, and sometimes it was authentic, but oftentimes I felt like I had to build this almost resume for people, if that makes sense.
It does.
So it wasn't that I was proactively doing the things and fueling those as my identity, but I felt like I had this resume of things that I would then project to other people, as though, here are these things that make me a cool person. I need to feel liked and accepted, and not realizing that that was a form of pride, perhaps in and of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you meet someone new, if you feel like you always have the need to one up them,
Yeah.
And I've met people like that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I ran a 5K. Really? Well, I ran a 10K.
I did it in this time in a 5-minute pace.
Yeah.
I didn't do that.
And so, I definitely think for me I've had to watch myself. Because when I even here at this conference, you meet all kinds of people who have all kinds of backgrounds. They're from all over everywhere, and it can be like, hey, how are you? You know, I'm Larry. I'm a pastor from Missouri, right?
Yeah.
I'm a pastor from Missouri. But sometimes it's like, hey, I'm Larry. I've written 7 books. Want me to sign one for you? You know?
Yeah. But Larry, it's even worse. I can walk around and I can look at people and I can make automatic judgments about where they've been, what they've done, what they think they are feeling and thinking of themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's sneaky.
Yeah, and I think anything that's about us or our need to come off as being superior. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yes, right. We feel like you have to one-up people to prove your enoughness.
If we feel like we have to be superior, then I think we've missed the point, of what true humility is all about. And I was having this conversation with a friend last week where the disciples are walking down the road and they're arguing over who's the greatest. I mean, these guys, they were Jesus, and they're walking down the road and they're arguing with one another over who's greatest. And we don't really know what the topic was, but I love it. I love Jesus' response because, they're walking down the road and they're just, like, I'm greater than you, the whole thing. And Jesus, he just kind of stops and he says, he looks over at them and he says, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. And then he doesn't say anything else, right? It's like, low key, Jesus was saying, you guys aren't nothing. Yeah. It's like, you guys are over here arguing over who makes the best omelet, right? And I saw Satan, fall from heaven like lightning. If anybody in that crowd had the right to be like, hey, look at me, look at me, I'm great, not only did he see Satan fall from heaven like lightning, he threw him out of heaven, right? So you talk about someone who had the resume, but he didn't feel the need, to constantly remind people of the great things that were about him. He just let his life do the talking.
Right.
And I want to be like that,
I do too.
Like I want the fruit of my life to tell the story. I don't want to have to tell people the story.
Right. And to be there for service for others versus self-gains.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is what your book is all about. Is trying to keep us on the fence, but it's not a work. Mm-hmm. It's a delight before the Lord.
Yeah.
And more than that, it's a workbook, which I really, really appreciate. But we always end our podcast, and we really thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Because I am really thrilled about this book. I'm going to buy a gazillion copies and hand it out to everybody I know.
Awesome. Well, this topic is great for day one of NRB too, because it can be easy to walk in here and feel like less subhuman or feel like you have to prove yourself. Yeah, absolutely. Love to hide in my hotel room and have an existential crisis.
But we always ask at the end, what's the moral of this story? Yeah. And we were debating it last
night. For like 30 minutes.
And she kept digging in my brain, and I'm like, Anna Gray,
she had to get more tea. She's like, let me get more tea.
I'm like, I can't think on your level right now. I just can't. And then but I knew it was in here. So what do you think? I mean, I think the moral of the story is, because you say it, where do you say it? You talk about it's our motives. It's like we always
self-awareness.
It's that new way of saying the heart posturing.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It's the motives. I think that's the moral of the story, is to know why.
Yeah.
Why don't you elaborate on that for the next
for
couple
sure.
of minutes?
That's the thing. Like we see these people in the Bible that make these crazy choices, and we want to just point our finger at them and be like, well, why did you do that? That was the dumbest thing ever. But when you start to read those stories, you see that there was a very clear path that they took, to get to that bad choice. And it all went back to the motives of their heart, whether it was Samson who, was trying to hang on to Delilah and not really tell her why he was so strong. Or if it's, there's a chapter in there about gossip, And,
yes, I saw that.
Yeah, and it's like
Renee's a huge fan.
yeah, I mean it's crazy. And about Noah, and one of his sons had an agenda and wanted to expose his dad, and
Yes.
and there were two other sons that were trying to cover their dad, and another son that was trying to expose their dad. And so yeah, Ham had some motives. I mean, he had some real things going on that we may or may not ever know about. But one thing is for sure, he was trying to stick it to his dad.
Right.
And so I think, for me, for sure, it's like, okay, before I make a choice, if I know that even if the choice is going to be iffy, the first thing that I need to do is look into myself and see, even Judas. There's a chapter on betrayal in there, and Judas got mad when Mary put the perfume on Jesus's feet. And John pointed out he wasn't mad because he wanted to give the money to the poor. He was mad because he wanted the money. And so later, what does Judas do? He betrays Jesus for money.
Yes.
His heart motive was he wanted money, right?
Right.
And so in every bad choice, there's a motive. And if we can go back, and what I try to do in the book is reverse engineer those motives and go all the way back to the very beginning to figure out, okay, why did this person do that? And it always goes back to the motive of their heart. And if we can figure that out and head that off, then that's a good day.
Well, Larry, thank you so much for joining us in our Moralty living room with our first juicy topic of the day.
Hey, thank you guys. It was so fun. It was awesome.
Well, we loved it. And are you going fishing anytime soon? And then
I am going fishing as soon as I get home.
And when's your next marathon?
It's going to be fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fall
I
marathon.
have a torn rotator cuff. I injured it in a CrossFit competition.
And you're still going fishing?
He has another arm.
Oh, yeah?
Just kidding.
Yeah. He's my other arm. So
ambidextrous.
I am on medical leave right now, actually. So.
Well, we certainly enjoyed having you on Moral Tea, and we just appreciate it. Look forward to coming up your way one day, and you could take us hunting and fishing. And
Absolutely. Anytime. I am ready.
Well, we appreciate you so much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.